buy-in and agreement on where we're going, and we can then start talking about how do we get there. And then we can start looking at, where's the money coming from? How would you analyze that or philosophically look at that? Where's the money coming from?
The actual product sales, or depending on everything that's offered. I mean, if we take all of the things we've talked about so far and offering the small engine repair, how much is coming from that? How much potential is there based upon the area, geography, the number of households, and all that stuff? And
First thing, and more on a micro level basis, familiar with this term, a SKU?
SKU number, yeah.
Stock keeping unit. Every individual item sold in the store has a separate number. Every size screw, every size washer, okay? How many SKUs would you have in a hardware store? 32.7 million on average. I don't know, make it up. A bunch, another generic term. Are you going to be able to track every unit and see how much it contributes to profit? You just about can with the software that's out there today if you want to take the time to do it.
As long as everybody's, scanning everything properly.
Yeah, which probably isn't going to happen.
No, but it's probably within 5 or 10% of accuracy.
But if you can at least break it down into product lines or product groups, you can get some sense of, out of all the stuff in the store, how much is that area of activity contributing to the profit. And when we start doing that, a couple of things should come to mind. One has to do with what's called Pareto optimality or Pareto's rule. Sometimes called the 80-20 rule. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
What's that say?
What was that? 80% of your...
Like 80% of the people.
Your profit goes from 20% to 40%.
Other way.
Yeah, the other way around.
About 20% of your customers are going to account for 80% of your sales, perhaps. Okay?
So repeat
Or-
business is
Yeah.
key.
Or about 20% of your stuff out there in the store contributes to 80% of your profit. But if you can identify what we call the heavy half, then our first thing to do is to look at the heavy half and figure out how to maximize it. And then maybe look at some of the other areas that are light contributors and ask, does it really justify the expense? Which takes me into that second or third reading, the BCG matrix. Now that thing's been around since I was in graduate school, right? The first decade after the Civil War. It's been around forever.
They used a different kind of tablet back then, huh?
Yeah, way different. Yeah, your tablet then was slate and chalk. Ask me how I know. The BCG matrix, and it's drawn different ways by different people at different times, is typically looking at market growth and market share. But you can change that, okay? Market share is high, growth is high or low. So if you were in this quadrant up here, what's going on? You've got a high share of a very slowly growing market. Okay? What do we call that? Cash cow. Okay? Cash cows, good or bad?
Good.
Real good, protect them. Real good, milk them. Because that's what funds some of your other things. Let's go down here. You've got a low share of a low growth market.
Dogs.
Loser.
Losers.
Dogs.
Dogs.
Yeah. What do we do with dogs? What do we do with dogs?
Get rid of them.
We decide,
Not rid of them.
but in most cases, the odds are against them because of performance. But if we're coming in new, we're going to give them at least a close look and say, is there anything else we could have done to make that a little better? But as a general rule, we stop investing in those. We do not, military term, we do not reinforce failure. Okay, this product didn't carry as long. What's over here? High growth, but a low share. High market growth, but you've got a small part of it.
Question marks.
These are question marks. But we're in the market and it's growing, but we're not big in the market. Do we want to get in big? Or do we want to kind of let this one pass and pursue some other options? And so literally, this is the decision quadrant. This is where we got to take a close look at things. And this is where, by the way, macroeconomics is going to come into the issue. What's going on in the world? What's going on in industry trends, in consumer tastes, in optimism, spending? that are going to affect the sales of that product or that line. And then up here, what do we got? We have a high share of a high growth market,
Rising stars.
rising stars or stars. And that's where we hope to succeed in the future. And so this is success, and we reinforce success. Now, you can change this all around any way you want. You could take this whole approach and apply it to an employee. What would be your two parameters? And you can make them up. How about ability
Yeah. Productivity.
and attitude? Could I evaluate an employee on that basis? What would that tell me about this employee?
Low ability, high, good attitude. High
No,
attitude.
low attitude, low ability.
Well, oh, yeah.
This is a loser, fire him.
Loser.
Okay. What about this guy up here?
That's what I
Got a
was-
great attitude,
Great attitude, but can't do a whole lot.
can't open a can with a can opener. What do you do with him?
Train.
Train him. What about this guy? Great ability, lousy attitude.
Have a talk,
Good, I like the word counsel.
counsel.
Yeah. And then this guy, girl,
Promote.
promote, nurture, take care of, encourage, you know, visit more responsibility on them, etc. So this whole BCG matrix is a matrix that you get to change any way you want for any application you want. And I would tell you to make use of it. It helps sometimes clarify your thinking. It doesn't give you answers, but it helps put things in perspective. The same way the DISC personality helped you look at people and group them in a way that might be constructive and helpful. You will remember it also had a matrix. Matrix thinking is very helpful in clarifying your thoughts. It's not complete and it's not necessarily good in making decisions, but it is very good in clarifying your thinking. So BCG matrix was just thrown in there as one example of many of the tools we use in strategy formulation. Where do we devote our resources? We can do this for you in terms of your look at the future. What activities are you involved in, and where are you wasting your time? A lot of ways to use that. We could go on, and we're going to do some of this later. We're going to talk about revenues and how to increase revenues. And part of it I'm going to borrow from managerial economics as I have always taught it. And it's going to be mathematical. There are some videos on it. If I can just lay out a brief advisory on that and ask you to be taking a look at it as it comes up in the thing. We're going to look at data which, let's say for the year 2010, our price of our product and our sales of our product, we were selling a product for $60 and we sold 40,000 of them that year. And in 2011, we raised our price to $70 and sales went to 34,000. You get this data from your historical records. And if your historical records are not generating this kind of data, you and your accountant need to have a counseling session, right? Because these are 2 points, $70, $60, 40,000, 34,000. These are 2 points, what? On a demand curve. And what I'm going to want you to do is to take those 2 data points and from that construct this entire demand curve. Where does it intercept here? Where does it intercept here? What is the equation for that demand curve? And then based on that, we'll talk about, at a price of $60, how much consumer surplus is out there? What is consumer surplus? Remember that term? Dr. Jake scores?
Yeah.
Would have been willing.
The monies that
Above the
customers would
price.
have paid above the price
If the
if,
quantity was available.
no, if you knew how to ask them for it.
Uh-huh.
That's like walking in to buy a lawnmower that you expect is going to cost $200, and there that buddy is for $130. You give him $130, but you, in your mind, you got $200 worth of lawnmower. You would have spent $200. You got a $70 consumer surplus. Now, when you put products out there at the same price to every buyer, you're giving away money. Because some of those buyers would have paid you more. The measurement in terms of the graph, is this triangle. From that price to the amount you sold, and then go up to the area under the triangle, consumer surplus. And I'm gonna have you calculate that and see what that means, and then we'll talk about how do we go about getting at least some of that money. And we'll talk about the techniques to do that. So revenue side, you know, this is gonna be part of it. And it does get a little bit mathematical. You wanna be, that's one of them that'll be on the final. Here's the data, construct the demand curve, measure the consumer surplus, and give me 2 or 3 ideas on how to go get some of it. I think that's kind of important stuff. Also, allied with that will be the idea of elasticity, price elasticity of demand, which you may recall from economics, however reluctantly. And it's a measure of, if I raise my price, am I going to make more money or less money? If I want to make more money, what should I do? Raise the damn price.
Yeah.
It's a measure of whether or not you're underpricing yourself. And again, it's very simple math, and conceptually it's very simple after you do it a couple of times. So we'll go through some of those. If I could look at that hardware store, and I could look at a particular product line, and I could find 2 data points over time. We sold rug cleaning, you know, you rent the rug doctor thing, right? And if we said, well, over the last few years, our prices have gradually gone up and we've lost a little bit of business. From that, I can tell you about what the demand looks like. And from that, I can tell you about how much money we're letting walk out the door. So if we're doing rug doctors, and we know that a lot of people would have paid a little bit more for it, what do? We don't necessarily raise the price, although sometimes we will. But what are one of the other things we can do? You know, if the typical customer comes in and spends $30 on renting a rug doctor and buying some shampoo, and we know he probably would have spent $50. How can we get some of that extra $20?
Another service with it?
Like?
Extra something, some special tool to do the couch instead of just the rug in?
Perfect,
Soap
perfect.
or
Love it. Hunter?
Soap
I
or
was gonna say the same thing, like a different.
What'd you say, Chris?
I was gonna say soap.
I was going to say deodorizer.
Deodorizer, or, and then
Or pre-treatment for pets.
Yeah, right.
then the stuff afterwards. Scotch Guard.
Scotch Guard. There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we're thinking creatively. Now we're taking each product line at a time. We're figuring out approximate demand and therefore approximate consumer surplus, also known as stupid money. It's stupid money because you're stupidly letting it walk out the store. Let's fix that. Let's start getting some of it, and let's teach our people how to sell it. Right? What happens in any retail clothing store if you go in the mall? How are the salespeople trained? You know? How are they measured on performance?
Oh, yeah.
They're not measured just by how many dollars worth of merchandise you sold.
I know they always ask you who helped you today whenever you get ready to check out.
Good.
I know it's with add-ons as well.
You were measured by the number of items you sold.
Yeah, 'cause I used to
That's
sell
one of
shoes at Sears in the same way, selling the stuff to, blacken your soles or whatever, those add-ons.
That's right. If you work for me in my clothing store, which also sells accessories, jewelry, purses, and shoes, every time somebody walks out with a single item, I'm going to chastise you. Why did you let that happen? Ideally, the person comes into your fishing store and says, I broke my fishing reel. You sell him a reel, and you tell him that I'll throw in some line here at a pretty decent price. Now you got the line and the reel. I got a good deal on a rod. We've got some new rods in. Let me show you that. Now we got you a rod and reel and a line. Why don't we go ahead and look at tackle boxes while we're here, right?
We got boats out back.
Well, right? By the time you get done buying your spinning reel, you're driving out there in a new SUV with a boat. Hoo-yah, that's selling.
Now we're going fishing.
You damn right. Okay, so that's one of the things we'll be talking about, those kind of techniques. Did you do some of that stuff in sales or sales management? Sales techniques? How to improve?
I don't recall that specific.
Okay, I don't know how Mark teaches it. I know he's pretty dynamic.
Really talk much. I mean, I just took it last semester. There wasn't a whole lot on there.
Relationship selling,
What you-
Yeah.
rapport.
Yeah,
It's more about value based on that.
yeah.
Yeah, and
The 80-20 thing.
Mark comes from the venue where you're selling typically high dollar items.
Right.
And when you're doing that, the relationship is key. You have to, if you're selling to an organization, you've got to understand the organization, who the key decision makers are, what they're looking for in their particular life. Whereas in retail, it's kind of a little different thing.
Yeah.
And we can talk about both of those. When would you use a lot of personal selling? Under what conditions?
High
when you're
dollar
selling high dollar and or complicated items. You don't sell airplanes by retail.
No.
How important is personal selling in a hardware store?
Somewhat.
I think in our case of JT's hardware, I think it's probably what they focus on the most, whereas Lowe's, they're very helpful at Lowe's, but it just seems a little bit more stale and.
Did I do the 7-step marketing plan with you? Maybe I did it informally. The first step in deciding to sell something, not starting a business or taking over a business, but you're going to start marketing a product or a service. The first step is define what needs it satisfies. What needs does a hardware store satisfy? What do you think?
Typically, you're trying to fix something. So it's
Fix,
I agree. You're
improve,
trying to
build.
fix or improve something, probably maybe it's broke. Hunter?
Do everything, I mean, a hardware store can support everything from new construction to remodeling to, like you said, I mean, some do small engine repair, I mean, there's quite a few different things. I don't know if that answers your question.
But is that the need you're satisfying, to fix something that's broke?
No, it's really the service. The customer may come in, they don't know exactly what
What
they
they
need, but
need,
they have
right.
a
There,
problem.
to
They
me,
have a problem.
Right.
Is
There's
the
a
key in the
problem.
hardware store. People go into a hardware store, I mean, contractors go into Home Depot. They know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bozos go into hardware stores and say, my thingamajiggy broke and I don't know how to fix it.
I need more.
Now, how important is personal selling?
Very important.
It's not personal selling anymore, it's customer development, customer relationship, and it is life or death. You either build the image that people say, I'd rather go down there and talk to somebody who will understand me and help me and not make fun of me than I would go down there and be a total stranger in Home Depot where I don't have any idea what all that stuff is.
And you gotta chase somebody around the whole store.
That's right.
Yeah.
So personalized service to me is what you're selling. The need you're satisfying is problem solving. You're not selling nuts and bolts, you're not selling small engine repair, you're selling problem solving. And you do that in a, what's the word I want, a consultative manner. And if you understand that, what does that tell your people when they're out there in the store? When the person comes in, be a very good listener and try and carefully understand what they're saying. Practice active listening, repeating back what they see and see if you got it understood, and build that rapport with the customer. Because that's where our 80%, 20% rule comes in. So I think that's important that everybody understand that. I could go on forever and we're going to run out of time. What else is important? We will revisit this case and discussions along the way. I invite you to comment on it or get into the discussion forum, and I'll join in too. How do you go about measuring the expenses in a little hardware shop like that?
Well, hopefully the books are very good. I mean, on mine, the one I asked the accountant for was the cash flow, because I figure behind that, the statements are gonna give me a good idea of revenues and expenses.
And I don't know if you got this in Hooper's course in accounting. There is accrual accounting and there is cash accounting.
Right.
What does accrual accounting do?
Man, now you're digging deep.
It records a sale when the sale is made, not when the money's collected. So you look at your books and it said sales last month $10,000 and you're going,
It's accrual based.
whoa, yeah! Except you didn't get a damn dime of it yet and your bank account is broke. So if you let that accountant set you up on an accrual system in QuickBooks and you don't watch your cash flow, you'll die and never know it. I've seen too many businesses do that. And I've helped businesses build cash flow projections on Excel so that every day, I want you to sit down on that Excel spreadsheet, I want you to give me 20 minutes of plugging in every dollar you expect to get for the next 3 weeks and every dollar you expect to spend. And when? Day by day by day by day by day. If we can't do anything else, at least we can control our cash flow. Cash flow is the lifeblood. Without it, you got no business. Okay? So one of your first questions is going to be to the accountant, are these books accrual or cash-based? And if he says accrual, your next statement should be, I want them cash-based. Now maybe I want 2 sets of books, one on accrual and one on cash. But I want some kind of cash-based accounting to know how my cash flow is doing in this business, as you said. Okay? But go back to expenses. How do you measure the expenses? We hope the records are accurate. If we think the records are accurate, then we can go back and look at fairly quantifiable things like labor, payroll. We can look at how much we spend on overhead, But when we start going into inventory purchasing, it can be a real nightmare. Because you're buying so many different small items, they can get all mixed up and you really can lose track and lose accountability. And, you know, allied with that is the fact that if you're buying small, low-dollar items, it's real easy for those to disappear from your customers and your employees. So, you know, accounting for your expenses is going to be a bit of a gray area that I think you personally are going to have to be very involved in for the first year or so, of seeing where that money goes. That's, to me, the worst part of the business, is trying to account for all those expenses. Okay. What else? I really don't want to beat you up for an hour and a half tonight, throwing stuff at you that... first class. State of the economy and the macroeconomics. There are a system or a set of macroeconomic study questions. It's got a graph on it. Broadly speaking, I'm going to want you to start out by understanding that spending is the heart of the macroeconomy. If you don't have any customers, you don't need employees. And if you don't have employees, those people ain't making money and they ain't spending, and it drives itself down into the ground. From the macro perspective, we ask, what does it take to keep spending going in our economy? Because sometimes it slows down. If you think back in 2007, December of 2007, we started the Great Recession. When was the Great Depression? 1929 up till about 1941, when we got into a war. The Great Recession was the worst recession since the Great Depression. It caused massive job loss. What caused that?
Inflation, a lot
The,
of over.
the bubble bursting.
The bubble bursting, particularly in real estate. For about 6 years, maybe 5 years, up until 2007, people had been buying houses with low, cheap credit and buying them, and everybody's buying them, and so prices are going up pretty quick, and everybody was buying a house so they could sell it in 90 days or 180 days and make $20 or $40 or $80,000. And so everybody's in there buying like crazy, just like they did with stocks in the late 1920s. And when you get that many people buying something, not because they want it, because they want to resell it at a higher price, that's called speculation. But when you get too much speculation, called over-speculation, prices go up way above the intrinsic value of the asset. And at some point, somebody out there has bought himself a $900,000 house, expecting to sell it for $1 million, and there's no buyers. And now he's got a $900,000 mortgage on a $40,000 income.
Good job, buddy.
Good job, buddy. And he
Nice
gets
thinking
married.
ahead.
Say again?
I said, nice thinking ahead on that one.
Well, everybody else is doing it. Everybody else is getting rich. I'm as bright as anybody else. No, you're just one of the lemmings, okay? Right off the edge of the cliff.
The average American also had absolutely no concept of what was backing every bit of that debt. The
Right.
CEO, Greenspan himself couldn't even explain it. With
Well,
19
Greenspan's the guy that let it happen.
Well, I
And
agree.
we'll get into
He
that.
didn't want to explain it.
Well, no, he got on national TV and said, I got 19 PhD accountants and we don't understand this form. That's when we got a problem.
Yeah, well,
It was
That's
sick,
what's back.
sick in every stage. I mean, the rating agencies were just
the rating agencies
compromised
were
their
lying through their
standards,
teeth.
lied, yeah.
The investment banks were repackaging these loans with no guarantees and selling them off.
No one wanted to be the party pooper, you know?
That's right.
Everybody and their brother was selling houses. You know, you had a lot of problems in that
But
area.
when the bubble burst and those prices fell, people lost their homes. And then we began to lose jobs. There's no more construction. Construction's key to our economy. And as we began to lose jobs there, think about it. When those people lose jobs, they're no longer coming into your hardware store or your restaurant or your barber shop for services. And now your income is down, and so you stop spending, and it recycles itself on down. So we have the Great Recession from 2007 till 2009. Since 2009, we're no longer in a recession, which means the economy's going negative. It's going positive, but it's going positive at such a slow rate that we're all standing around here wondering, when is it ever going to recover? And in a more material sense, so what's the job market like for you when you finish college today? I don't care how old you are. It's not as good as it was before 2007. Now, I think there's still plenty of good jobs out there. In fact, I'll guarantee it. Because what we know for sure from every employer survey made is we need good people and we can't find good people. One of the fallacies behind that, we're looking at resumes on people which doesn't tell us anything about how well they work in a team. So how do we measure that? Because I've got resumes from people who sound like they walk on water. But too many of them, when I hire, 6 months later, I'm firing them because they are just total misfits. In the words of Mr. Fitzgerald, he and I were having a conversation before class, there's a whole lot of people out there who got trophies in middle school for attendance. They think they're great. So how do you filter through that as an employer and find somebody worthwhile? Because I promise you, we need good employees. Entry-level, labor-intensive, manual labor, but managerial just as well. You just got to find the right jobs. And the key to most of that, by the way, in my opinion, is networking. If you're going to jobs.com or monster.com and you're looking for a job that way, that's just about as bad as sitting at home and mailing out resumes to people who don't know who the hell you are. You're really wasting a lot of time and money. I don't know how I got on that topic, but we were talking about the recession. Since 2009, we're recovering slowly. So this is kind of the background perspective on what's going on in our economy right now. In our economy right now, we have very, very high levels of debt. We have a $16 trillion debt. A lot of people say that's inordinately high and scary, and it could cause the whole economy to crash. Well, there's two things going on here. Look at the debt compared to the size of the economy, the GDP. Debt to GDP ratio is important. But when it's big, because you got a lot of debt, there's two ways to fix that ratio. You can pay down the debt, or you can build the economy, grow the economy. Arguments in Europe and somewhat in the United States were we need to pay down the debt. We need to cut government spending. We need to shrink government. We need to really tighten our belts. That's called austerity, to be very austere in your financial management. The alternative way of thinking was called stimulus, which was we need to grow the economy. Don't worry about the debt, grow the economy. I'm going to take you through those arguments. But one of the arguments is our debt is so high, people are going to stop loaning us money. Well, you'll know when people are getting ready to stop loaning you money. Why? They will start asking you to pay higher interest rates. What's happened to the interest rates our federal government pays on its borrowed money? They're still down at 2% and less, and after inflation, they're negative. We are borrowing money for free after inflation. There's not a lot of people out there looking at the United States saying, "Ooh, you're too far in debt, we're not going to loan you money." Ain't happening, because this is still the safest economy in the world. So we're going to talk about which strategy would have been more important, and which strategy, if you implement it, what would it do to you in your career and in your business? How does that impact? How does that drive interest rates? How does that drive customers and consumption? In order to get into that too, though, we're going to, we're talking spending, we're going to go into two historical views of how the economy works. We're going to talk about, I'm going to make you learn, the classical view of the economy, which is the belief in free markets and very little government. And we're going to explore Keynesian economics, which is the belief that government can and should assist a sick economy. Would you want to take a guess off the top of your head which political party in the United States supports either of those views?
Republican, Democrat.
Yeah.
The Republican view is here, and they were the austerity supporters of shrinking the government. And the Democrats tend to be over here of, yeah, we can handle more debt, let's grow the economy first. Okay, I want you to understand both points of view. Once we've done this, we'll talk a little bit about some monetary policy and our Federal Reserve. And some of our Federal Reserve chair people that we've had. Alan Greenspan, who was the man in charge of our banking and money system throughout and into the Great Recession. Followed by Ben Bernanke, an expert on the Great Depression, who engineered us through the Great Recession. And today's chair for the first time, anybody know?
Janet Yellen.
Janet Yellen, a woman, who is more of the Keynesian view too, as was Bernanke, at least somewhat. Greenspan was very much over here, let the markets work, they'll figure it out. And we want to talk, I want you informed about that in the sense that you can discuss it, read about it, and have opinions, and get involved in it. And then to view, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my future, my business's future? Okay? So that's the macro part of where we're going. Most of it's on video, you can watch those at your leisure. That's kind of where we're going. I will see you, what, in 2 weeks, is that right? I don't remember.
17.
Yeah, and on the 17th, we will be talking about Sun Tzu, as the Americans say it. And there's a little reading there called Bien dans sa peau. Remember that phrase? What is bien dans sa peau?
Feeling comfortable in your own skin.
Comfortable in your own skin.
Good job, Chris.
Allied with that, I'm sorry?
I said, good job, Chris.
I don't speak French either.
Allied with that, and I don't have it here. Let me see if I put it in here somewhere else. I'm gonna continue to add readings as I find stuff that I think is worth your time. I will put them in as announcements, and I will add them to the reading list. I'll either give you links or I'll copy the whole article. I'm sorry?
That's my son's birthday.
What
The
day?
17th, I just realized.
The 17th of September?
Yeah.
How about that? Mine's the 18th.
Is it really?
I'll be 36. Personal branding, brand image. You familiar with the term? Ever done any reading or much or discussion on it? We're going to pick that up. I'm going to hit you with some of that as well as a number of other readings as I run it. I've got probably 6 of them I'm contemplating which of them to throw at you as part of this course. Not so much as testable material, just because I think you're at the point you would read this and absorb it and you would find what benefit there was in it, okay? Intended to help. If I'm going to make something required, I'll try to remember to make that known to you. A lot of it is just for your own personal improvement or edification. All right? We good? Yes, ma'am.
Question, and if you answer this at the beginning, I apologize.
No
It's
problem.
late. What is the schedule for reading within the text? Is that just kind of on your own? Is there?
On your own.
Okay.
There is a test bank of questions.
Right.
I would say the date for the exam is somewhere in November. Get it done before then and on your own schedule.
So I just didn't know if there was any of these that correlated with the rest of this, if it's just kind of a.
No, there's not too much in that book that correlates with anything in reality.
So, we don't really need the book?
You do because there's 30 points out of your, 10% of your grade comes from that book.
The test
But-
questions. The test questions,
The test
test
bank
banks
come from that
the
textbook.
We're just not at
I'm sorry?
that level of view.
It's the same problem. I fought this when I was an undergraduate, taking my policy course. And this is 1970. They're teaching us about Ford and Chrysler, General Motors, and I'm coming out of Florida with a bachelor's degree. I don't think this is very relevant. This is not something, and this, remember, this is an applied degree. There was nothing applicable about that stuff. Very little. So we won't beat it to death. And so I would encourage, I'll tell you what I'll do. If I can, I'll put a book on reserve at the library. Would that help?
There's one there.
There is?
Yeah, our text, yeah, there's one there.
Okay, I didn't know they'd put it there yet. So if you haven't bought it, maybe you could use that, but if you have bought it,
I think you get the international copy, which is a soft cover for $30 or something.
Right, and
It's a
I
lot
did
less than-
actually did find a PDF of the international copy online. Maybe
you
I'll
did?
post it.
Can you
Please
I
share
don't know
that?
how large of a file it was, but
It's
yeah, I'll
normally
at least share the
about
link
10
to
meg
it.
or something, yeah, it's
Yeah.
big inside.
it is.
And it didn't look terribly different.
It won't be. The international edition is identical. I don't mean to totally belittle the textbook. It does have concepts and terminology in there, some of which you should be familiar with. So Porter's 5-factor model. That's one that if you say you took a strategy course, you ought to know what that is. Kind of like the BCG matrix. Basic vocabulary. But applications-wise, it's not real strong. All right? Anything else? I am delighted to see many of you again. I hope we enjoy the term. Let me know what goes on, and I cannot tonight, but perhaps next class after we meet, if anybody would like to go out and have a beer,
Sure.
I could do that, okay? Even though that's your son's birthday.
I know. We can drag him along too.
That's
I'll
fine.
make my husband come.
How old
Yeah.
is
So
he?
he can drive. He'll be 12.
Oh, cool.
Just started
Ask him
6th
along.
grade.
Yeah, we'll watch our language.
Yeah.
Oh, he's way used to it.
Well, we'll buy you a beer for your birthday, or I will.
Oh, yeah,
that's
we can do
right.
that in
should do
advance.
that.
Excellent idea.
And the Sunny's right over here sells beer, so we could do barbecue and Sunny's.
We can do barbecue and Sunny's, or sometimes we go to La Fiesta, the
Yeah,
Mexican
nice,
place.
yes, they have good margaritas.
Yeah, and if we finish here by 6:30, 6:45, we can stay there quite a while.
Yeah.
All right, drive careful. Peace. Bye.
Thanks, you too.